My daughter-in-law did not know I was standing at the bottom of the stairs when she told my son the safe was probably empty. "She never had anything worth hiding," she said. "Your mother was careful with money the way poor people are careful. It's not the same as having any." My son said nothing. That was its own kind of answer. I went back to the kitchen and finished my tea. My name is Ruth. I'm 73 years old, and I have lived in this house for 41 years. I raised 2 children in it. I buried a husband from it. I watched my grandchildren take their first steps on that kitchen floor, the one with the crack along the 3rd tile that I never had fixed, because my husband put his foot through it the day our son won his first school prize, and I could never bring myself to erase it. That is the kind of woman I am, the kind who keeps the cracked tile, the kind who keeps other things too. My husband George passed 4 years ago. He was not a wealthy man in any way the world would recognize. He drove a second-hand car. He wore the same coat for 11 years. He had a saying, "Spend on what lasts, save what remains." People thought he meant money. He did not only mean money. After George died, the visits began. My son and his wife came more frequently than they had in the previous 8 years. They were attentive in the way people are attentive when they are calculating. They helped me with the garden. They drove me to appointments. They spoke in my presence about the house. A property like this, maintained properly, would be worth quite a lot. That was my daughter-in-law, standing at the back window, looking at the garden George had planted. "Mum, have you thought about what happens to everything when—" My son could not finish the sentence. He had always been gentle that way. The gentleness had been useful to her. I told them I had a will, that everything was in order. They nodded as though I had confirmed something they already knew. They did not ask what the will said. I noticed that. People who believe they know the answer do not ask the question. I want to be accurate about what happened over the following 3 years, because accuracy is important to me. It is perhaps the most important thing about me. George understood that. It is why we were well suited. The first time money went missing from the household account, I thought I had miscounted. I am 73, and I made allowances for my own mind. The second time, I made no such allowance. By the third time, I had opened a separate account at a different bank and begun moving money there quietly. The way you move something valuable out of the path of something you can see coming. I did not confront my son. I want to be clear about that. I am not certain he knew everything his wife was doing. She had access to the account because I had trusted her with a card for emergencies, and she had decided, apparently, that her lifestyle was an emergency of sufficient frequency to warrant regular use of it. Over 31 months, the total was not a small number. I know the exact figure. I have always known the exact figure. I kept the statements. I also kept other things. My daughter-in-law had, at various points, borrowed items from the house. A painting from the hallway. The silver candlesticks that had been a wedding gift. A small clock that had belonged to George's mother. She borrowed these things and did not return them, and did not mention them, and I believe she thought I had not noticed because I had not said anything. I had noticed. I wrote it down. Date, item, approximate value, and in the case of George's mother's clock, a note that it had been appraised the year before George died, and the appraisal document was in the file. I had a great many files by this point. They lived in the safe in the bedroom, the safe that my daughter-in-law believed was probably empty. People ask me sometimes, not about this, they do not know about this, but about life in general, whether I am a forgiving person. I think about the question carefully before I answer. I'm not unforgiving. I am precise. There is a difference. An unforgiving person refuses resolution. A precise person simply insists that resolution begin with accuracy. You cannot forgive something that has not first been honestly named. I had been naming things for 3 years, very quietly, into the files. My daughter also knew nothing of this. She lives in Edinburgh. She called once a week, and I did not tell her because I did not want her to carry it. She has her own life. She has her own weight. What I was carrying was mine to carry. George would have understood that. He was the same. He carried things alone, and then he set them down very carefully in a place where they could be found. I wrote the letters over 2 years, not quickly, not in anger. 1 letter for each category of what had happened. The bank statements were attached to the first letter. The list of borrowed items with the appraisals was attached to the second. The third letter was personal. It was addressed to my son. It was not unkind. I tried very hard for it not to be unkind. I wrote it 8 times before I was satisfied with it. The third letter said, "I know what was taken. I know you may not have known the extent of it. I have made provision in the will accordingly, not as punishment, but as accuracy. The house goes to your sister. The savings go to your sister. What remains of the joint account, after what was borrowed is accounted for, goes to your sister. I love you. I have always loved you. That is not in question. But love does not mean the ledger disappears." I put the letters in the safe. I put them in a box labeled "to be opened after." And then I got on with the rest of my life, which was quieter and smaller and in many ways more honest than the years that had come before it. I did not know, when I died, exactly how it would go. I had imagined various versions. What I am told, by my daughter, who was present, who called me later and wept through most of the conversation, is that it went like this. My daughter-in-law asked for the safe combination before the funeral was over. She framed it as practicality. Someone needs to deal with the paperwork. There may be insurance documents. It is better to handle these things promptly. My son provided the combination. He had it written in his phone because I had given it to him years ago for emergencies. He had not considered that I might have changed it. I had changed it. The locksmith was called 2 days after the funeral. My daughter had arrived from Edinburgh by then. She stood in the doorway of the bedroom and watched. When the safe opened, my daughter-in-law reached in first. She found a box. Inside the box were 3 envelopes, and beneath them, a folder of bank statements, a handwritten list of items with dates and estimated values, and a letter from a solicitor confirming the terms of my will. There was no jewellery. There was no cash. There was no document naming her as a beneficiary of anything. There was only the record, every page of it, dated, signed, witnessed where necessary, and entirely accurate. My daughter said the room was very quiet for a long time. Then my daughter-in-law put the folder down and walked out. My son stayed. He read the letter I had written him. My daughter said he read it twice. Then he sat on the edge of the bed, my bed, the one with the quilt his grandmother made, and he was quiet for a very long time. My daughter sat beside him. She did not say anything. That is the right thing to do when someone is learning something that changes the shape of what they thought their life was. You sit beside them and you do not speak. I have been thinking, in the way the dead must think, which is to say, without urgency, without a body, without tea, about what I actually wanted. I did not want punishment. I want to be very clear about that. The will was not punishment. Accuracy is not punishment. If someone has taken something from you and you simply stop giving them access to more, that is not punishment. That is the ordinary geometry of trust. What I wanted, I think, was for the record to exist. George taught me that. He was a bookkeeper before he retired, not an accountant, a bookkeeper. There is a difference. An accountant tells you what the numbers mean. A bookkeeper writes down what the numbers are. George believed that writing things down was a form of respect. Respect for what had happened. Respect for the truth of it. I kept the record because things happened and I respected the truth of them. Even when the truth was that my son's wife used my card at a garden centre 4 times in 1 month. Even then, I wrote it down. Date, amount, what was purchased. Because it happened. And because things that happen deserve to be acknowledged. My son rang my daughter 6 weeks after the funeral. They spoke for 2 hours. My daughter told me about it, in the way she tells me things now, quietly, in her head, the way you talk to the people who are no longer there to answer. He said he had not known the extent of it. My daughter believed him. I believe him too. He is gentle, my son. The gentleness was used against him too in its way. He repaid what could be traced. That was his decision. My daughter did not ask him to. The will did not require him to. He simply did it because the ledger was accurate and he knew what accuracy required. I think George would have understood that perfectly. The house is my daughter's now. She is thinking of letting it to a young family. She has not yet decided whether to fix the cracked tile. I hope she keeps it. Some records are worth more than the repair. If you have been sitting with something that has never been written down, a debt that was never acknowledged, a truth that was never spoken, a record that only you are keeping, I want you to know that the keeping itself has value. You do not need the confrontation. You do not need the resolution. Sometimes the record is enough. Sometimes bearing witness to your own life, accurately and without bitterness, is the whole of what dignity requires. There are more stories like this one on Voices of Quiet Souls. Ordinary lives, the things they carried, the things they left behind. If this story found something in you, share it with someone who might be ready to hear it. And stay with us. The quiet ones always have more to say than anyone expects.